You, Chrissy, for that wonderful story. Love multiplies, hate shrinks and divides. Can you hear me if I speak out here? Can you hear me with this? Okay. So, about 15 years ago, I went and acquired a license to be a psychotherapist because my mentor at the time, Rabbi Edward Friedman, had done that, and I thought, well, I need to do that. And I never intended to actually do psychotherapy. It was part of my work or my background to help me do what I do, which is to work with congregations in transition. But in the intervening time, I have found myself in situations on a number of occasions where I have been called upon to do psychotherapy, and interestingly enough, I ended up working with certain groups. The biggest one was couples. You would be shocked to hear this, but there's some couples that get into arguments and fights and contemplate divorce and whatnot. And the second group I worked with a lot was people who were around age 20. And the third group I worked with, to a lesser extent, was men going through a midlife crisis. And that does happen too. I know that might be a shock. But one of the things that struck me profoundly as I did this work, which I was glad to do, but it was not part of my main work. But one of the things that struck me is the diversity of people and people's problems, the nuances of people's problems. I mean, you can say that many people have difficulty with a marriage or with a relationship, but that's true, but the nuances of it are infinite. And the struggle of a person going through a midlife crisis of some kind, the details are infinite, but there's an underlying similarity. But I could not help but notice, amid all this diversity, that there were certain points of commonality. There were certain things that stood up and standed out and said, boy, this is an important aspect of every human life. And one of them had to do with the degree to which a child growing up in a home experienced being acknowledged, affirmed, cared for, noticed, affirmed in all the nuances of the personality of the child. So to an extraordinary degree, children growing up really don't ask for much, but they do want to be seen. They do want to be acknowledged. They do want to be heard. And their uniqueness needs to be affirmed in some way. And of course, we're all imperfect and we can't do that perfectly all the time, but it's a very great need. And if this does not occur, this is the other part of the pattern. If it doesn't occur, then that person is set for life on a journey to try to find love and affirmation somewhere. And so people will spend their entire lives looking for people who will acknowledge them, affirm them, and love them. And this leads to some problems, as you can imagine, sometimes. For example, a child may grow up in a household in which there's addiction. And the household is chaotic, and the child has to literally manage their own life and take care of mom or dad and do for mom and dad what they cannot do for themselves, or take care of the other children and so forth. So as they move into life as an adult, there goes with them this desire to find affirmation. There are infinite variations on the conditions that give rise to this basic pattern, but it always has a profound effect upon people. And one of them is this continual, lifelong search for love. And what I'm saying is not about blame. People act as they have been acted upon. And there's another side to this, a flip side to this need to be acknowledged and affirmed. As a person is growing up through their childhood, it is very important that they don't get the message that the world revolves around them, that everything should be driven to and oriented by indulging them. We could say that this is a balance in nurturing the self. And so through these experiences of psychotherapy, I learned that just as we have a body with physical needs, we have a self, an emotional, psychological, spiritual self, which needs to be nurtured. And that is an unconditional necessity of our lives, that we have to have our emotional, spiritual, and psychological selves nurtured. And by nurturing, I mean being seen and heard, feeling empathy from others, and being respected as a person. And I believe that one of the great functions of a church like this is to be a place where people are intentionally trying to create and sustain a community where people are genuinely seen, genuinely heard, genuinely feel empathy, and are respected as persons, no matter what their individual characteristics. And we may summarize all of this in one phrase: the nurturing of the self. What is true for the child is true for the adult. We, each of us, need nurturing as persons. We need the nurturing of others. We need the nurturing of ourselves to ourselves. Unlike nature, which is continually giving us things and nurturing us, we as persons can turn away and against from this need to nurture. And the central purpose of a church, I believe, or one of them, is to be a place where we nurture one another, where we nurture the self, and we grow. In a few moments, we will all join together in a ritual in which we will say these words and hear these words. Sharing this bread, we acknowledge that our lives, physical and spiritual, are sustained, are nourished by others, that we are part of a wide community that includes not only those around us in this moment, but the vast web of all existence. May it be so.